After nearly a decade of marriage, a woman finds herself trapped in a toxic relationship overshadowed by her controlling mother-in-law and emotionally distant husband. I, 29F, have been married to my husband, 35M, for 5 years, and we've been together for nearly 10. On the surface, our life seemed perfect. Good jobs, a comfortable home, and the promise of a bright future together. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, our marriage was a slow-brewing storm, and now, I've finally reached the breaking point. From the very beginning, my mother-in-law, MIL, was a constant source of stress. She made everything about her from the moment we met. At our wedding, she wore a white dress, claiming it was a family tradition. It wasn't. It was a deliberate move to overshadow me. And when I confronted her, she feigned ignorance. My husband? He just stood there, silent, avoiding any confrontation. Her behavior worsened over the years. She criticized everything about me, my cooking, my appearance, even the way I managed our home. I'll never forget the time she called me fat during a family gathering, making sure everyone heard. I looked to my husband for support, but he just looked down at his plate, pretending not to hear. The situation escalated when she started accidentally destroying my belongings. The most painful incident was when she threw out a necklace that had belonged to my grandmother, dismissing it as cheap costume jewelry. That necklace was one of the few things I had left of my grandmother, and she discarded it without a second thought. When I tried to talk to my husband about how much it hurt me, he dismissed it, saying I was overreacting and being too emotional. Then there was the issue of the house. We had bought our home together, but it never felt like mine. My MIL had a key and would let herself in whenever she wanted. She rearranged the furniture, criticized my decorating choices, and even brought over her own curtains and put them up without asking. I came home one day to find my wedding photos had been replaced with pictures of my husband as a child. When I confronted her, she just smiled and said, "This house needs a woman's touch." My husband didn't see the problem. But it wasn't just my MIL who made me feel small. My husband did too, in his own way. He spent more time on Reddit than he did talking to me. He was constantly giving strangers relationship advice online, which was laughable considering how he treated me. He spent hours rating women's bodies on Reddit, even rating some of them a 10 out of 10, while he couldn't be bothered to remember our anniversary or even the details of my day-to-day life. He forgot my birthday last year, but never forgot his work schedule or anything that was important to him. When we argued, he would become incredibly hostile. He'd throw in a sarcastic buddy at the end of his sentences, as if I was just some acquaintance he could barely tolerate. The arguments would usually start over small things, like the fact that he never helped with the housework. The dishes, the laundry, cleaning the house. Everything was on me. He acted like being an adult was optional for him, as long as he had his job and his Reddit account. The final straw came a few weeks ago. I'm 5 months pregnant with our first child, a daughter. My MIL had started making comments about how she would whip the girl into shape and how she'd raise her to be tough because I was too soft. It made my blood boil. I didn't want this woman, who had gone out of her way to make me feel worthless, having any significant influence on our daughter. When I tried to talk to my husband about it, he laughed it off. He told me his mother meant well, and that I was overthinking it. Overthinking? I was 5 months pregnant, and I was terrified of the environment my daughter would be born into. But the moment that truly broke me was when we were discussing childcare. My husband casually suggested that his mother should watch our daughter while we were at work. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that, especially given how his mother treated me. He snapped, calling me paranoid and telling me to get over it because his mother was going to be a big part of our daughter's life whether I liked it or not. This is the same woman who believes corporal punishment is acceptable. I've seen her hit my husband's nephew for the smallest things, and no one in the family does anything about it. They act like it's normal, like it's just the way things are done. But it's not normal, and I couldn't bear the thought of my daughter growing up in a household where she might be belittled or even physically harmed, with a father who wouldn't lift a finger to stop it. And then there was the ultrasound. Our first ultrasound, the first time I would see our daughter. My husband didn't come. His mother needed him for something urgent. What was so urgent? Fixing her Wi-Fi. He chose to help her with her Wi-Fi, over being there for the first glimpse of our daughter. That told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in his life. But that wasn't the only sign I had been ignoring. A few months ago, I found out that he had been secretly messaging his ex-girlfriend. At first, I thought it was innocent. They had been friends before we met, but the messages quickly turned inappropriate. He didn't even try to hide it. When I confronted him, he shrugged it off, saying it was just harmless fun, and that I was being insecure. I felt my heart shatter, but I pushed it down, telling myself that I was overreacting, just like he said. After all, he hadn't actually cheated, right? I started seeing a therapist secretly, trying to make sense of the mess that my life had become. My therapist helped me realize that I wasn't overreacting, that my feelings were valid, and that I deserved better. But even with that knowledge, leaving him felt impossible. How could I walk away from the life we'd built together, even if it was crumbling? The final breaking point came when I overheard a conversation between my husband and his mother. They were in the kitchen, talking in hushed voices, but I could hear every word. My husband was telling her that he was considering asking for a divorce because I was too much to handle. He said he was tired of my constant nagging and that he missed being single, missed the freedom of not having to answer to anyone. His mother encouraged him, saying he could do better and that I was holding him back. That was it for me. I packed my bags that night, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. I wasn't going to stay and be treated like an afterthought, a burden. I deserved better, and so did my daughter. As I walked out of that house for the last time, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. I've already contacted a lawyer, and I'm ready to fight for what's best for my daughter and me. This isn't just the end of a marriage. It's the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I reclaim my self-respect and create a safe, loving environment for my daughter. I'm done living in fear, and I'm ready to move forward on my own terms.